Well, hello. We are back for another episode. I think we're going to call this episode 8 of Contemplating Resonance podcast, and this is going to be another Deconstruction Stories episode. And I have yet another wonderful guest and wonderful friend entering the studio, and I am going to get the name right this time. There's a running joke on this podcast is that I either don't ask for the name, or when I do, I completely overdo trying to get it right, and now it's just become a thing. So this is kind of like the opening joke is how bad I'm going to mess up the name, but I'm going to try it. Your name is Dawn Dickerson-Leger.
Well done.
Look at that. Look at that. See?
That's the first time I've heard someone say it back to me, because I just started using my first name recently, so yeah, that sounds really good. Thanks.
it actually does sound. I mean, it has a very strong, like, Christian power author sound to it. Like that's the
Wow.
name that you put on a front of a book. Just adding that
Okay.
extra Dickieson in there just kind of makes it.
Those strong consonants, man.
So many authors have those. We're going to go by all three names. And I'm not particularly fond. I'm Matthew Eric Stein, and it's cool and all, but it sounds a little too like I wish I were royal, but I'm not. So I don't know. I don't know where that's coming from. I make up weird vibes. But anyway, this is not to talk about my name. This is to talk about not even your name. We're off that. This is to talk about you and your story. But I wanted to go ahead and let you introduce yourself because my guests always do a better job than I would. So why don't you take it away, Miss Dawn Dickerson-Leger? Did I get that right?
You did. Thank you, Matthew E. Stein. Good to see you, friends.
Good to see you.
So hello. I am the pastor of an online community called Harbor, and that's a place where we want this folks and most of us just want to do some kind of faith change. Might be post-evangelical, might be, but usually moving from kind of more conservative to kind of more open, progressive way of faith. I am also a Ph.D. candidate at Martin Luther University College in Ontario, studying church leadership and creative practice. And I'm bisexual, cis, married to a really great fella who just has capacity for all of that. And I live on the east coast of Canada, which is like the most beautiful place in the world. And I love just sending people random pictures of the ocean and clouds and making them jealous.
Yeah, I was just thinking as soon as you mentioned the coastline, I'm like, yeah, you send some really incredible pictures. And then it's just like, as soon as I finish saying that in my head, you start talking about sending the pictures. And she's not lying. Like, they're good. They're great. They're great pictures. You would do well to come to Harbor just so that you can see, our community photo feed. It's something. We have some photographers in the group. We really do. We really do. That have an eye for, and also timing. Like, how do you find all these creatures?
The creatures blow my mind because I was talking to someone yesterday he was telling me a story about talking to a bear, and I'm like, well, okay, bears sit still. Yeah, they can be still. And then he started talking to a deer, and I'm like, how did you accomplish that? Like, every time, a deer, appears in my peripheral vision, they just take right off. They're like, nope, don't want nothing to do with that lady. So, yeah, but we get some really great pictures.
I've seen some interesting deer. So I went to school about an hour southeast of where I'm sitting, in Oxford, Mississippi. And at the time that I was going to school there, the town was not even remotely the size that it's become since I left.
Mm.
Like with this, I left right before the Super Walmart came, and at the time that was like, once the Super Walmart comes, everything blows up.
Oh yeah.
And it really has, and the student body has as well. Like at the time, I think there were like 10,000-ish students, and now there's like 16,000-ish students. And the city's kind of blown up to but at the time, I delivered pizza. This was one of my jobs post 18. This was one of my ways of making money, and I would drive up to a house that was really not that far off of the main stretch of roads, and there's like 8 deer hanging out in the front yard, and I'm just walking up with this pizza to go and the deer, I mean, they're like, hey, what are you doing? But they're not running off. Like, this is their yard.
Love it.
And yeah. So the animals there always seem to be just incredibly used to the fact that there would be a bunch of random people around at all times.
Wow.
Also, the squirrels, for example, in the grove in the center of campus, like you could just walk right up to them and they'll just look at you like, "What? Like, you think you're the first human I've seen today? You're like the 5,000th human I've seen today. Big deal." So
That's nice.
yeah.
My university campus where my graduate work is called Oregon University, and I will call it an infestation of Canada geese, which is our national bird.
Yeah.
And they are beautiful in the air. Please leave them in the air. But because when they're on the ground and you have to follow them, it is disgusting. And they're nasty. So, kind of like Canadians. Yeah, we live place for distance. Don't get too close.
Oh, that's funny. We have geese here. I don't know if I don't know. Maybe they are Canadian. Maybe all geese are gross. I don't know if it's just a Canadian geese thing, but these geese are definitely gross. So either more than just Canadian geese are gross, or these are Canadian geese. Because these are definitely gross. And like, there's a lake, little neighborhood lake that I like to take the dog around, and for about 6 months, that's where the little, whatever you call the community of geese, that's where they decided they were going to congregate for about 6 months because they have different lakes. Gaggle. Okay. Is it a gaggle if it's like a big group or a small, just any group? I don't know.
I've always heard them called a gaggle. Yeah.
This is clearly, this is at least a gaggle of geese. Okay.
Okay.
And yeah, like, just, the sidewalk is just kind of like, watch your step. Watch your step, watch your step, watch your step. And I've got so many stories that I care not to go into about children and puppies and everything else doing all the wrong things in the presence of the geese. So there we are. This podcast is going interesting places that we did not expect. And I love it.
From the ocean to animal droppings. Yeah, I love it.
Right. Because we love to not only bullshit, but goose shit on Contemplating Resonance, the podcast.
Awesome.
So, and I did want to mention to those of you tuning in maybe for your first episode, Harbor Online is no stranger to the podcast, because I do believe episode 6, yes, that should have already gone out the door by the time this one goes out the door, would be another of our pastors, John Matthew, and I got his name right, and only because I heard someone else say it out loud. But then I asked. I was like, let me make sure that I got this right. And then when I was typing my little script into the window that's just above our video feed, I just typed John Matthagew.
Yeah, because he has a French song too. Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? If I just read the script, it'll be fine. So we're getting better every single episode with names, but who knows? I don't know that we're having a competition here, but as far as deconstruction stories go, every single deconstruction story has been not only amazing, but 100% unique. And I expect this one to be no different, because if I'm not mistaken, so everyone we've talked to so far, and I think this goes to your point of our little email exchange before we recorded this. Everyone I've talked to thus far comes from a pure evangelical Christian denominational background of some kind. Without calling out the names, they're all pretty much coming from similar ideas that we needed to deconstruct to get to wherever we got to, because we all ended up in very different places, which is very cool. You don't come from that background, and you said, hey, let's talk about that, and I thought that would be fantastic. So I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you start wherever you want to start and go wherever you want to go.
Sure. Thank you. So I might not be entirely clear. I have a little evangelical in there. I was raised Baptist, and I went to Baptist youth groups in high school and did IBCX thing in university.
Now, is this Southern Baptist affiliated or a different Baptist denomination?
I think it's the American Baptist Convention.
I honestly don't know that much what the differences are between all of us Baptists of background. Other than Free Will Baptist, I understand exactly how they're different and how we were told that, of course, they're not real. Because they got called out. But yeah, I don't really know. Other than things like immersion baptism, also
did that.
An essential. Okay, I think that's the really obvious one.
Yeah, and the personal salvation story. Yeah. So yeah, I did that. Probably in spite of my mother. It wasn't really her. Well, it was totally mine. And I would say, growing up as a Baptist in the 80s, my experience of it, there was still a lot of hardcore purity culture, and it was the AIDS epidemic. So frankly, churches didn't have to work that hard because everybody was scared of sex, at least in the rural areas, although we were all having it anyways. So they didn't have to work that hard. I would say I grew up in a gentler evangelicalism, if I could say, but still had to, but still had to face, some of those truths coming out of, especially when I came out of university, and as I was introduced. So I was introduced to Anglican faith when I was at university. I went to Bishops University, which is an Anglican foundational school. It's not Anglican anymore, but the history and tradition is still there. And I started attending the Anglican chapel, which is very different from my experience because, first of all, it was very old. I mean, there was stained glass, there was wooded carved pews, huge organ, big altar at the back. So the pulpit was just this little lecterns that the priest didn't even use. I mean, she just preached from the steps. And then this altar at the back and communion. And, I remember I used to, when I would go out for communion in the Anglican Church, you go up to the altar for communion. I still had a lot of these ideas that idolatry, right? We're not worshiping the bread and the wine. We're not worshiping the altar, right? We're not doing any of that. So I would be really intentional about standing when I went to receive communion while everybody else was kneeling. And that was fine. Like, that happens sometimes. But I was like, no, I am not going to kneel. That is idolatry. I am not doing that. And then one Sunday I went, and I was really sick. And by the time I had walked up the aisle to the rail, my knees gave out instead of kneeling. And I've been like kneeling for communion ever since. So it's just something about, saying the same words every week, and singing familiar hymns. Which I know a lot of people find boring, find not meaningful, but I was able, we talk about resonant, and because as I became more familiar with the liturgy, I was able to connect with the deeper resonance that was happening as we worshiped and as we prayed. And that's what really drew me to the Anglican faith. And then I graduated university and still pretty conservative on theology, but really dig in the Anglican faith. I was starting to challenge a lot of the ideas about the infallibility of Scripture. A lot of the stuff around like cisgender purity culture. So I remember one time, this guy, talking about what's in the Bible, right? And he's like, God has a person who is like your soulmate has already been chosen for you before you were even born. And I was like, where does it say that in the Bible? Because every time I read about marriage in the Bible, it's telling me not to do it. So, and he didn't know what to do with that. So I was definitely like, what you're saying is biblical is not what I'm experiencing as biblical. So I'm seeing something very different. And I was becoming more comfortable with that. I thought it was because it was more rooted in reality, really. It was more rooted in history. Sure. It was, it's to criticism. So, but morally, I was still pretty conservative. So still like no sense for marriage, definitely, main one woman stuff. And then like a lot of folks we know who started the Deconstruction journey, I met a gay couple. And it was these two guys that I work with, and became really good friends with one of them. We started doing Slash together, and one day he asked me if he could come to church with me. Like I was not proselytizing this guy. Like I was waiting. I was not doing that. That was never my thing. But he wanted to come to church with me, so we went. And afterwards, we had some lunch, and he said that his partner, who I also work with, wanted to invite me over for coffee that afternoon. And I was like, ugh, this is like, okay, this is not work. This is not the professional realm. This is like me with two gay guys. My brother was out, but he was living in England, and, typical young adult sibling rivalries. So he was kind of in the back of my mind. But I remember walking down Queen Street, Charlottetown, with Michael, and just praying with all my being, like, God, let me see what you see, let me feel what you feel. Like, if this is of you, I want to know that. But if this is, against your will, I want to know that too. And I'm just opening myself up to whatever you have to reveal to me. And I also said I'll stay for half an hour. Well, 3 hours later,
right.
they're making me supper now. And I ended up living with them for like several months. We would watch Queer as Folk together. They caught me up on things, one night. Okay, I was thinking about fun at this time in my life, but I love this story. So, as my rooms were next to each other, there's a wall machine, and we each had a TV in our room. So normally we would watch Queer as Folk together in the living room. But this particular night, we were all really tired. So we're like, no, let's just watch in our rooms. So they're in bed. I'm in bed in my room. And it's like 10 minutes before the show goes on. Because it was on late at night. Like, it was on at like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night on our stations. So, anyway, I just turn on the TV because I'm like, whatever's in young. Is this sweet? These two guys. I'm still quite a prude, and I still not had that. I'm still not like, I really don't know much. And these two guys dressed in leather. One guy had a piercing on his cock, and a guy was like stringing a leather strap through it like this, and I was just like,
Jesus.
oh my god! And I peered through the wall, watching thing. Turned out okay. That was too much. Oh, they were. I mean, they're still great times. I love them to bits. And anyway, so that was a huge part of propelling me in this journey. And Anglicanism is kind of a hole for that. So, like Anglicanism is this, you say it's a very wide tent. The history of it is long and complicated, but basically, Anglicanism is the answer to Catholics and Protestants hating each other. So we've always been able to hold like different belief systems, and I felt like there was room for me there. And at the same time, I was really feeling this call to priesthood, and people were affirming that call for me. I was really drawn to preaching, but and I was a server, so which is like the kind of you're like the best boy of the altar. You just wear a white robe and you go and get things, but you do it in a very orderly fashion. And I loved it. Like, I loved being up there. I'm like, I never want to leave this like holy ground. And so I went forward, and I went through seminary, and I was ordained right in the midst of our debates around what we called then same-sex blessings. And I was like kind of a really good Anglican, because I'm really good at following the rules and following processes. So I shouldn't say I'm good at following them. I'm good at rules. I know them. I know how to work with them. I know how to work around them.
Okay.
But like,
That
I'm very much
rules.
like, we are in a system. We work in the system. Maybe this is more. And so, yeah, but it's also, what I didn't know at the time, it's very deeply personal, because I wasn't out to myself as bi yet, because I grew up in this community, a very tiny rural community. We were all either Baptist or Roman Catholic. And I'd heard of homosexuals, mostly men, didn't really terribly interact to. And you were either gay or straight. Like, so when I'm having feelings towards my female housemates, I also had feelings for the guys. So I thought maybe all girls felt that way about girls. Because, so and sometimes put that away. And I was like, okay, I felt this like to guys. And lived that way for 45 years. So yeah, I mean, it was hitting me really personally, but I didn't know why. And I would say, I served as a priest in church ministry for around 15 years. And I loved being a parish priest. It was really fucking hard, because the institution is in catastrophic decline, and the powers that be don't know what to do about it. And so they put all the pressure on us local congregations to keep the money going up so that they can support the big out institution, so that the church doesn't die. Meanwhile, all these little churches are dying. So, like, why we have it? So,
Sure.
yeah, so
Yeah.
for me, like, and I think that a lot of people, I know that I did. I started totally about 10 years in, maybe a little longer. I would say I started kind of deconstructing Anglicanism. And I just want to say a bit about what I mean by that, because a lot of my people, my Anglicans, when they see the word deconstruction, they're like, that just sounds like growing in your faith. And I agree. It is a huge way of growth. But it's something different. It's deconstruction is taking a critical look at the power structures that exist, I think, within the faith that you hold. It's not just, I don't know, I don't know. It's, wow, these are the toxic structures and theologies that have wounded me, that have hurt me. And it's not just because there's theologies floating around up there. They were instilled in me by people who were holding on to power. And I have to own my own place in that too. So, like getting into the stance and heritage debates, like I say, I was really good at rules, and I was willing to work in the system and to make the system better. That was always what I wanted to do. Let's make the system better. And so I went to conference after conference and stood in microphones and gave people like enough of what I thought they'd hear and maybe listen to without making people too uncomfortable, but always a little uncomfortable because I'm me. And I'm always a little bit extra. But then I would have other friends who couldn't turn machines. I was the one who came out like guns blazing, and then everybody would be like, okay, so let's tell you what we really mean. Now that you're paying attention.
Love it. Love it.
So, and so we would stand there and we would act exactly as the church told us to act in order for the church to discern what we were supposed to do about this and have this issue. And then we would have tables where, people would come to us and they would just start arguing with us. They start yelling at us and telling us we're going to hell. And then that table would become a place where people could come basically and cry and debrief without making a scene, because we don't want to make the conservatives too uncomfortable or make them feel ashamed of what they've said, because we don't want them to leave. Like, that was the only thing, is like, if we have said the conservatives, that's going to split the church, and that's the end of it. So we can't have that. So we just have to keep everybody happy. And that was my really, really hard, that was making me teary just thinking about this really, really hard lesson that the rules exist to maintain status quo at all costs. And even at my expense and at the expense of people who are far more vulnerable than me. And I think a lot of Anglicans who I know and love, and I'm still an Anglican, would say that's being a little too critical. But that's what I experienced there. And I've experienced it in other issues, especially when it comes to clerical abuse. But that, as of this week, I know no less than 8 sexual offenders to our clergy. First name basis, all guys I've worked with, guys I've done youth ministry with. Ignore that little sunset button, ball, I don't know why that on there. But that was not about that. Like, tell me a job aside from like maybe the police, but like tell me a job where a person just in their regular daily work is exposed among their colleagues to 8 sexual offenders in a career. Like, unless you're hanging out with Jeffrey fucking Epstein, like, I just, like, what the hell? So, like, and I mean, that's, I mean, yes, there are many good priests. I hope and pray that I am one of them. But when that exists, like, that level exists, you can't tell me that the rules work. You can't tell me that the church is protecting the most vulnerable. Like, you can't convince me of that. And then the third thing that just offended me, you're gonna have tons of trigger warnings on this podcast, because I now talk about sexual abuse, and now they talk about Indian residential schools that they're all they care of.
We've been around the block a couple times already. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna have to put some warnings on this, but I'm here for it. So
Thanks.
please press on.
Yeah. So the third thing was, the discovery, or how do they put it? I can't remember the word used. I'm going to use the word discovery, but that is not the correct word, because Indigenous people knew they were there all along. Like the uncovering announced the revelation of the bodies of children on the grounds of some of our historic residential schools. So I'm moving to run by the Anglican Church of Canada, and one of the reasons I am an Anglican is because in the early 90s, our national leader offered a full, unconditional apology, knowing that that apology would open us up to lawsuits that could have very well just torn the whole church apart, financially. That didn't happen, but it could have. And he did it, despite all kinds of advice, because he was like, ladies is for dealing with this. And that's one of the reasons I'm an Anglican. But then to hear, and then it was just a summer of more penetrating radar on more properties and more what they thought could be bodies found. And I was like, I can't anymore. Like, I can't wear this collar anymore. Like, every time, like, it just seems like every time I think I'm reconciled with the church, it starts to hurt.
Yeah.
And, like, so, yeah. And so my deconstruction, my mainline deconstruction, I guess, has been, again, looking at the way that people in power, just like an evangelical deconstruction, looking at the ways that people in power preach a message to maintain power. They may have what we would say are good intentions, like, we want to maintain the church so that we can keep feeding the hungry. Okay. But there are many ways to achieve that without the offenses that we commit. And, I've heard the church is slow to change. We should rejoice that we've seen the change that we have. And I don't think so. Like, that just, I've seen lots of systems that are much more complex than ours change a lot faster. And if our system is that slow to change and respond, then maybe that's something we need to look at and become a little more nimble, which is why I love Harbor. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much there to say. Wow. I was just thinking that when I had given you kind of the run of the show said, yeah, it gets heavy in the middle, so we have to come up with something, a little more lighthearted to go at the end. And yeah, we got heavy there, didn't we?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
But no, it's honestly it's the point of the
So
show.
maybe can I tell you just to go right at that? So I'm a sole license as a priest. I retired from parish ministry in June 21, mostly for health reasons. Because all of that and then a pandemic, I was done.
I mean, yeah, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I still in touch as a bishop. I still doing open things. And so this fall, I got to spend a couple of months in charge of the church. I did see a little help while the priest was on leave. And it was wonderful. Wait, it was just this lovely community of people, really faithful, taking care of each other, trying to, be a good witness, especially, with the homeless population in their community, and preaching, and just a real open and receptivity and graciousness. And one of the things that's happened in the past couple of years for me, and we've talked about this a lot, is my perspective has become much more mystical. And my ideas of God have just expanded. And we can talk more about that in a minute. And so I'm standing there one Sunday behind the altar and using the Book of Common Prayer, which uses language from like the 16th century. Like it's the 17th century. It's these and nows, all that. We prayed for the queen, now we pray for the king. And I hate it. It's so masculine. It's so sin heavy. I hate it, but I do it because people love it and find God in it, and I love them, so I do it for them. But this one Sunday, I'm up there and I'm praying the Eucharistic prayer, and I'm listening to it for the first time in a really long time. Emma, there is some incredible mysticism in these words that we don't pay attention to. We talk about the mystical union of the body of Christ. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, and so, it's talking about bringing heaven and earth together. Like, it's incredibly powerful mystical language. And so I'm really grateful that that tradition is being renewed in me, even if the institutional structure is still a place where I can't quite fit right now.
I mean, I think you're doing it right.
To be funny, no.
I think you're doing it right. I mean, I think you're like, just to me, the whole thing of you've got this very balanced view of, hey, here's all this stuff over here that's just really just awful and shouldn't exist. But here's all this other stuff that's really good and really should exist, and they're in the same place. And you know what? I want to keep the good stuff and I want to get rid of the bad stuff. And most of the bad stuff is tied to the structure or the institution or the system. But none of the good stuff has to be. Like, it's not, there's no inherent connection to me between like the mysticism that you're saying is so beautiful and hey, that has to hang off of that structure, because guess what? So many of the same mystical ideas show up in so many of the traditions that clearly, and that's of course in my original tradition is what they tell you, don't go read all this other stuff because it's demonic. So no, don't go read all this other stuff because you're going to find out that our ideas aren't unique at all. And in fact, we're using them improperly.
Yeah.
So that was one of the first things that I did when I, was like, I didn't know it had a name when I deconstructed. But when I went full on into it, I was like, okay, I'm going to go read all the books they told me not to read. And they were wonderful. I mean, absolutely wonderful. Like, Rob Bell was an absolute demonic person, just terrible, wants to kill the church and kill everybody and send us all to hell. He is the sweetest person on the planet, I swear. I reread Rob Bell's books just because he gets my head. He doesn't know he gets my head, but he gets my head. And it's just like so many of the ideas that I've encountered, he has a really good knack of bringing together and showing how, hey, this is the same as this, it's the same as this, it's the same as this. And then I start looking around with those same eyes and saying, oh, this is the same as this, is the same as this. And one of the cool things about Harbor is that we're all like ridiculously different people. And yet we absolutely adore one another, I think, because it's like, oh, here's a bunch of people that are just as weird as me, but in completely different, delightful ways. It's like Cloud Cuckoo Land in the Lego movie, or at least it has that same kind of like just goofy, fun, bunch of creative people. But yeah, like rarely do I see things work when it's like the one thing that brings everybody together is that they're not the same.
It's true. Yeah.
I mean, we are, but we're not. Like the spirit is the same. Like it's undeniable, the spirit that's the same, because you feel it when like we all finally came together in a physical location for the first time. It's like, oh, there's a real energy here that was there right when you walked in. It didn't have to develop. It was just there.
The miracle at Stony Point. That's what I'm calling that retreat now.
Right?
Yeah. Like that was Harbor was such a weird.
I think you're doing it right.
We understood each other there. I'll just say Harbor was such a weird place for me to land because I wasn't looking for an online community, so to speak. So I started attending Harbor before I became a pastor at Harbor, and it was just part of my recovery from my breakdown in September 2020. And none of us to go back to church, but I was just looking for community. I was looking for friends, and John and I had followed each other on Twitter once at a time. So I started going to Evangelical. And yeah, like I always thought Harbor will be the thing if it's a thing that first of all, it's gonna just be the thing that gets me through this really rough time. And then Harbor will be the thing that I kind of keep on the side where my friends will be, where we do cool things while I also continue doing my Anglican Church thing. And then that's just not what happens. Like, so it's there, I stuck on a Thursdays, and which are non-sacramental, where we like barely pray, where we, don't do anything that would kind of resonate with my liturgical sense.
As much as I hate low church as like a description of anything, we're as low church as it gets.
Oh yeah. And yes, those discussion groups have been up for half an hour, and the spirit moves, like the sharing and the wisdom. My God, like, I go in as a facilitator and I've got the list of questions, but I am constantly like writing notes. I'm like, I am learning things every week, and because wisdom is just moving. And Sterrett is just creating something really special.
Mm.
And I can't get enough of it. And then we meet, like you said, we meet together in Stony Point, and lots of people saying, at a time when people are saying online community is not real, it's not no community, we need, you need to be regularly face to face. And I mean, Harper is not like, I'm totally for face to face contact. Matt, I wish you and I were in the same room right now because I miss you and I love you. But if online community were not real, then we would not have responded to each other the way we did that first night.
I know.
Right?
That's the thing.
Like,
That's the thing that you can't deny it. Like, people talk about things being undeniable. I'm like, well, it's hard for me to explain. And we weren't a huge group, but we weren't a tiny group either. That many people who had the same exact experience.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember anybody who walked away from there feeling awkward, uncomfortable, anything other than, I mean, I can go through the list of names in my head and verify that everybody was absolutely on the same page about what happened. And listen, folks, I'm not talking, we didn't have like a transfiguration in our midst or anything. This is not like a cult thing, I promise, although we joke about it being a cult thing. But it was just, for me, and I wrote about this on this blog and Harbor's blog, and then before that it was just some words that I put down. But like, experiencing all the things that you were told you were supposed to feel when you were experiencing God and when you were experiencing the people of God. And I'm like, honestly, that's just, I mean, we did have some communion stuff that we did that was really meaningful.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that wasn't the overriding language of the weekend. It was more just about that community, and it's experiencing everybody in that community, both leaving some things behind and also picking up some new things, and then learning what it's like to be together. And because here's the thing, like, I don't know if it's most of us, but I think probably a good number of us didn't have good feelings to attach to most of our experiences coming together in the name of God.
Yeah.
I mean, I have plenty of wonderful memories. I have plenty of hymns that will set me off. But still, like, when I stop and think about it, and I think this goes to your point about criticizing the institution versus criticizing, I guess, the mysticism that's associated with the institution. Like, most of my not so great emotions and memories and experiences, again, they're associated with the institution. And so if I can kind of set aside, well, of the stories that I have, and the more I dig, the more I find, the ones that are associated with the institution, if I kind of set those aside a lot of the time, like, it needs to be talked about, but it doesn't need to be talked about all the time. And that was one of the things that really I struggled to get to, was it's okay, you've acknowledged that this stuff is broken. That doesn't mean you have to wallow in its brokenness every single day, because that's not healthy. That's also not making anything better. And so, honestly, as an individual, a lot of the best ways that I can make things better are to focus on those other stories. But then as we come together into bigger groups of people who are doing that, well, there's also an opportunity to maybe move the lever on some of those institutions. So it's like, I think it is going to be incredibly slow compared to how we want it to be, but that's because we're now on the outside pushing
That's
something
right.
that is
Yeah.
designed to perpetuate itself.
Yeah.
It's working exactly the way it's supposed to work.
Right? Well, and so one of the reasons I started calling it the miracle at Stony Point is because I'm sure you know this experience too. Like, obviously not everybody could come. Not everybody was ever going to be able to come. Um, See, there's a group of us who've had this really powerful, intense, beautiful experience. And then we come back to the main group. And, some of us, we're anxious, like, what's that going to be like? And how do we make
Yeah.
everybody feel included? And what I observed was somehow all of us who had been on that retreat, we made like some really tight friendships were made on that retreat.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
100%.
And at the same time, like it never became cliquish. Maybe that's because we're online. I don't know. But somehow that spirit of vulnerability and openness and they just like willing to try something together. Um, Rather than that being that's what the people who went on the retreat experience, it became something that we shared with the whole community. And so I've noticed so many people in our community have grown in the past year um in how they understand how they understand God, how they understand themselves in relationship to God. And um because the retreat was the beginning of creating this space of where we said we can explore and it's okay and we'll carry each other, we'll hold you through this because we all know this is hard.
And it sounds incredibly simple, and it is in terms of just, hey, yeah, it's not like we had to come up with this incredibly amazing system. In fact, I think in many cases it's our lack of system that makes us work. But the guidelines, like we have this little slide that we pop a couple times every time we get together in sort of a formal way. And again, they're basic humanity, but it's part of the DNA of the group that it's like, hey, it's not just we're popping the guidelines to pop the guidelines. It's almost like a liturgy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would focus on one and take some time and read them to yourself. And
and it's that, I find comfort in seeing those go up every Thursday that I show up, because it's like, oh yeah, it's still here. It's still the structure, the basic foundation, the trust, the vulnerability, the safety, all of those things. And these are all words that I love because they're all things that I think a lot of people don't ever experience, and B, it doesn't have to be that way. We actually can, as humans, I believe, decide enough. We can stop. And I just choose to believe that. I may never see it. My children may never see it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I choose to believe that because I see too many examples of it's like, oh, Harbor, it's like this little thing. Most people have no idea who we are, but oh my God, it's powerful.
Yeah.
This is not a Harbor commercial, but it turned into one.
You're welcome anytime. Yeah, I was in a meeting recently with one of our. It has to be said, Harbor exists because we get some really great Sunday from different places, and some of which are mainline churches, which I think is wonderful. And I think it's really important for the church to do that. So we were in a meeting with one of our funders, and everybody was kind of going around and telling their stories about how they were using the money. And the director of the was saying she's been to Harbor a few times, and she was just like, oh, and she asked me to share, and I share it. And she said, look, everybody, like, you just have to go to Harbor. You have to experience it. And this is a person who's very, articulate. She's a published author. She's
Yeah.
an academic. And she's just like, I don't know what to tell you, except you have to go. And it's like that just, I was kind of blown away. I don't know what to add to that. You said,
I mean, to me, that's the truly amazing experiences are the ones that get described with that language. Like we don't have the language, or at least we feel like we don't have the language to describe, because everything that we reach for is lacking somehow. And of course, that's how, what is it? I'm going to try to use a big word, the apophatic tradition. That is, exactly that concept, except applied to God.
yeah.
Any language that we can use to describe God is describing an idol, because, well, if we could describe it, then it's, bigger than God. And these are the things that I think about in the shower. I've got some. I keep a pencil pad that's waterproof in the shower, and that's where I write my deep thoughts that occur, because
That's
I
amazing.
lost way too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the number of problems I've solved, big ideas that I've had, in the shower, because that can shut my, executive brain off long enough for things to pop out of that subconscious, which is now like, this is what I'd spend as much of my time as I can allow, is trying to give my subconscious room to give me things, because that's where the good stuff is.
Absolutely. That's where the resonance is. That's where we feel the resonance. Right?
Indeed, indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
Well, we're running up on an hour here,
Gosh.
and we never got to our last section. But I think we kind of talked about we didn't say much about your dissertation. Did we bring it up? I don't remember.
It's funny because when you were talking about your big ideas, I was about to say, have I got a dissertation for you to read?
Well, bring it. Let's see.
It's yeah, so I'm in the writing stage now. I've been studying creative practice. So anybody who just does paintings or photography or sculptures, I've talked to a poet, to go over handful what like just, and they've all been clergy, because it's a Ph.D. in leadership, and looking at creative practice and the theology of co-creation, which is that our original calling as human beings, which is stated right in the first chapter of Genesis, is to partner with God and that creation our sauce, and that everything we do we are partnering with God to create the kingdom here. And art is one of those places where we become where we connect so deeply with the spirit, with creation and the creator, that things get created and put into the world that couldn't any other way. And when we can, and so, but to claim, like to make that claim, I am a partner with God. I mean, there's people that have like that, like God is my co-pilot thing, which I think is a terrible thing to say, because basically what you're saying is God is my assistant, and that's not okay. But to say I am a co-creator with the creator, and the creator is surrendering themselves to co-create with me, and the only way for the kingdom to come is for me to surrender and co-create with God. And So yeah, I'm studying artists, third degree artists who are kind of getting into that, and that's my dissertation. And I hope to defend an office, and then I'll be Dr. Dickerson-Leger, and I hope, and yeah, it's
Well,
what I've
I
been putting
can't
right
wait.
now.
I can't wait to read that when I get to read that, because I remember the very first time you and I got on a call that we were flagging as spiritual direction. I was pretty stuck at that particular moment. And the way that you unstuck me was basically giving me, I think, what was very a little bit earlier version of those same ideas. Because
Yeah,
as soon
it
as I
was.
heard you going through all of it, I was like, I've heard this before, but when it was a baby.
Yeah,
But yet you,
it is. It is a baby. Let me tell you. Gosh, just like
but yeah, I just, I think it's an incredibly powerful idea, and it's right. I think it's right. It just resonates again, going back to the whole title of the thing. It resonates with how I experience reality. It resonates with the stories that I hear people tell about creativity.
yeah,
And ultimately just my ever evolving, that I'll never be able to write down view of how everything works. It
yeah,
resonates with that as well. It's like, yeah, this is, the highest nature that is me, that I believe is God. Is, it's like there's just this cool conversation going on while I'm making a podcast or writing something or drawing something, or um, my wife is in the other room. She's back on another knitting spree, and just churning out things. But all of that stuff is what you just said.
yeah,
All of those
absolutely.
things. And we feel good when we're doing it,
Yeah,
because we're doing what, I'll use abstract language, but what we were made to do.
absolutely. Yeah,
Not in the, going back to something you said, very like, oh, your person is picked out for you, like your profession, what you're supposed to do all day every day is picked out for you. I don't think so, but I do
yeah,
think that there is a resonance that each of us has towards certain things, that when we do those things, they make us
absolutely.
happy, they make us more powerful, they make us more, all of the things that we want to be, because we're doing what we were made to do.
Yeah,
um how's that work? I don't know yet, but maybe I never will. But I don't care, it does.
yeah. Imagine a God who works not just through our faults and our failings, but in our desires and in our joys and in our fun. Like God uses all that stuff too, right? Um, and that's I think those are some of my favorite moments in my own life and when I'm talking with folks is when we we kind of go, oh, like this is something that I love doing. Like I truly love it. And God doesn't think it's silly. Or God doesn't think it's flawed. Or God's not looking a
Right.
finger at me. Like God's just like, yeah,
Right.
go. Like, you know, you want to date that ridiculous person because they make you feel good for the next 6 weeks? Yeah. Like go and experience that affection and that, that mental connection. And then they're gonna take off and wait for us for forever. Okay. Like God, yeah, God uses all of that. And so much of vocation, I know you know that, but when we talk about calling and vocation, what we're really talking about is how this like God is pulling on like, and somebody else described it as like God is pulling like these threads to in a certain direction. Like that's not using our desires. Like, those are
Yeah.
those aren't to be renounced. Those are to be listened to.
Right. It's like, once again, do the opposite of what you were taught.
See, yeah, but not the
Because
opposite of what I teach you.
no, I know.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
And well, I break everybody's rules at some point. But gosh, I forgot where I was going to go with that. It's gone. Didn't resonate long enough. But it's true. We do have to bring this particular episode to a close. I'm not happy about that. I'm going to have you back because this was too much fun.
When's I how about when I publish my dissertation?
Oh yeah. That would be the second promise of another episode around the publication of something. So that sounds like a good goal to me.
Is
I'm
John
with it.
publishing something?
No, not John. This is Marla's third book in her trilogy. Is going to come out later this spring. I believe. I don't remember exactly when, but I'm on the launch team kickoff. I think is on like Valentine's Day or something. So
cool.
So I'm a part of that. I'm going to help push that one because we have become again random good friends that met on Instagram randomly somehow.
Well, she has fans at Harvard, so if she'd ever like to come and meet some poetry fans, we'd love to have her.
Well, before we cut this off, are there any links or socials or anything that you'd like to share with the listeners to interact more with you or read something or whatever?
Yeah, so my discussions are a bit sporadic right now because of the big D. But generally my username on the internet is the flags of Dawn, like the flags of Dawn, all one word, apostrophe him. And so that's where I am on Instagram, on Facebook, on X, which I have a very iffy relationship with right now. And I also have a website, which is dawnleger.ca, where you can learn more about my spiritual direction and some of my coaching work. But again, I'm not taking any more new work until the fall with my dissertation stuff. But you can find me there, and you can always find me at onlineharbor.org.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. This was great.
Yeah, really, right?
Yeah.
We have not had this, kind of a long conversation in way too long. So
it's true.
I'm glad this one is. I'm glad other people are going to see how cool our conversations are.
Me too.
Well, with that, I am going to sign off and tell everyone good night, and we will see you on yet another episode of Contemplating Resonance.
Thanks, friend.